we are going to start with the new unit, Ecology. Under Ecology, we have taken up the chapter Ecosystem. For board examination from the Ecosystem chapter, we can expect for around 6 marks. Ecosystem is not a very new concept to you all, because regarding ecosystem, we have studied in our previous lower classes, and also many of the components that can be seen in ecosystem also we have studied in our lower classes. Let us brush up our knowledge and also let's go through the new concept under this chapter. First of all, the term ecosystem was coined by Tansley. Now, what is ecosystem? The interaction between biotic and abiotic components or the factors in such a way that there is a continuous flow of energy so as to maintain the dynamic equilibrium of a given geographical area at given time is called as ecosystem. In a very easy way, we can say that ecosystem is nothing but the complete total interaction between the biotic and abiotic components with its surrounding. We call it as ecosystem. Ecosystem is a functional unit of nature because it consists of all the biotic and abiotic components, and also interactions will be going on in the ecosystem, and hence we can say it as a functional unit. While explaining about the definition of ecosystem, we used the word biotic and abiotic factors. Now let us see what are biotic factors and what are abiotic factors. Abiotic components. These are the components which are not in a living form. That means, example we can take that light, temperature, water, soil and air. Not only this, many of the other factors which are in a non-living condition can also be taken as the abiotic components. Absence of life, that is abiotic components. Next, biotic components. Biotic, bio itself is telling it is having life. Biotic components or the biotic factors are the organisms which are having life. That means we have taken up the examples for biotic components, that is producers, consumers and decomposers. All these are considered or called as biotic factors or biotic components. There are majorly two categories in the ecosystem. Which are those? Let me see. The first one, terrestrial ecosystem. Terrestrial, that means the factors or the components which are present on the land surface are called as the terrestrial ecosystem. The second one is the aquatic ecosystem. That means the ecosystem or the biotic or the abiotic components which are present within the water medium. Such kind of ecosystem we call it as aquatic ecosystem. And also some other artificial ecosystem can also be considered, which are those the crop field where the crops are grown, that can also be considered as an ecosystem, and the aquarium which is made by man, and this is considered as a man-made ecosystem. So these are the two categories of the ecosystem. Next we shall see the detailed examples regarding the terrestrial and the aquatic ecosystem. First one, terrestrial ecosystem. Example, grassland, desert and forest, etc. These are all nothing but the terrestrial ecosystem. As I mentioned before, all these ecosystems are present on the land surface, and such type of ecosystem are called as terrestrial ecosystem. Example, nothing but grassland, desert, forest, etc. The second type of ecosystem is aquatic ecosystem. Aquatic, none other than the water mediums will come. Various different types of water ecosystems, such as one is pond, a very small ecosystem, lake, stream, and also the marine, that is nothing but ocean and seas. These are the very huge or the aquatic ecosystems that can be seen easily. There are some functions of ecosystem. Let me see one by one. Ecosystem structure and function. How the ecosystem is made. What are the functions of ecosystem? Ecosystem is the functional unit of nature. We are repeating this point. Why we are calling it as a functional unit of nature? Because the maximum all the types of interactions between abiotic and biotic factors is taking place in the ecosystem which is present in the nature, and hence because of that reason we are calling the ecosystem as functional unit of nature, where both the biotic and abiotic components interact among themselves with their surrounding environment. Identification and description of plants and animal species of an ecosystem gives its species composition. That means the identification and description of plants and animals. I'll take an example of pond ecosystem. If we take the example of pond ecosystem, if this is the pond ecosystem, there will be biotic and abiotic components both. If we take example of abiotic components such as many of the soil, rocks or many stones will be present inside the aquatic ecosystem, that is abiotic factor. In the meantime, there will be biotic factors like fishes, microbes, decomposers, many aquatic animals will be there, and also many of the phytoplanktons, aquatic plants also will be present. There will be interaction, or there will be many of the interactions between those biotic and abiotic factors, as well as we are identifying which are abiotic, which are the biotic factors present inside the pond. What we are getting? We are getting the identification, description of plants and animal species of this pond ecosystem, and that is what we are getting, the species composition. That means a species composition. That means what different types of species are present in a particular ecosystem, that we are getting, and hence what we can say, there is a need of study of the particular ecosystem. Stratification. What is stratification? It is nothing but the vertical distribution of species occupying different levels is called as stratification. The species will be occupying different levels. In the trophic level, that is called as stratification. To understand this definition, let us take a small simple example. The trees occupy top vertical layer of the forest. Top vertical layer of the forest is taken as tree, and the shrubs occupy second layer. Shrubs occupy the second layer, and herbs and grasses occupy the bottom layer of the ecosystem. If the forest is considered, if forest is considered as the ecosystem, the topmost layer is occupied by the trees, and next to the trees, the shrubs occupy the second layer or the strata, and third and fourth or the bottom layer of the ecosystem is occupied by the grass and herbs. So this type of the vertical layer of the forest, what we have taken as an example, where the arrangement or the placement of the trees, herbs, shrubs, as well as in the bottom layer, that is nothing but grasses are occupying these layers, and this we call it as stratification. This is a simple example that can be taken for the stratification. Next slide. In the next slide, we are going to study about abiotic components. From the beginning of the chapter, we are using the word abiotic. They are the non-living components of the ecosystem. They do not have life. Such all components are called as non-living components of the ecosystem are called as abiotic components or abiotic factors, such as water, minerals, grasses, soil, dead remains of both plants and animals, and also the excreta of the plants and animals, light, temperature, humidity, wind, rain, etc. Like this, all these factors which do not have life are considered as the abiotic components. The second type is biotic components. This is nothing but vice versa. Biotic components are nothing but the living beings present in an ecosystem. Whatever may be the living organism, starting from the unicellular till the highly evolved plants and animals, microbes, decomposers, all type of living organisms are kept under or considered as biotic components. They are, example we are taking, they are nothing but producers, consumers and decomposers. Now, let us see one by one. What are producers? These are nothing but the green plants, photosynthetic bacteria and cyanobacteria. They all have the ability to prepare their own food with the help of carbon dioxide, water, in the presence of sunlight, and also with the presence of chlorophyll pigment. By utilizing all these raw materials, that is carbon dioxide, water, light and also the chlorophyll pigment, by using all these raw materials, producers, that is nothing but the plants and many of the cyanobacterians, are preparing their own food, and such type of organisms which are capable of producing their own food are called as producers. Hence, green plants are called as autotrophs. That means the green plants are called as autotrophs because the plants have the ability to synthesize or manufacture their own food by utilizing carbon dioxide, water, sunlight in the presence of chlorophyll pigment, and hence they are called as autotrophs. The producers convert solar radiations into chemical energy. They are receiving the solar radiations, they are converting solar radiations into chemical energy. Hence, the producers can also be called as transducers. They are called as transducers. This is about the producers. Next, we shall see about consumers. The consumers are the animals which feed on other organisms. Even here, the name consumers itself is explaining consume means to have, to take in. That means the organisms which feed on other organisms for its nutritional purpose. Such all organisms are called as consumers. As they ingest food, or we can also say as they intake food, consumers are also called as phagotrophs. They are also called as heterotrophs. Heterotrophs means the organisms or the consumers which are depending on the other organisms for their nutritional purpose. Such all type of animals or the organisms are called as heterotrophs. There are three different categories of consumers. Let us list one by one. The first one is primary consumers, secondary consumers, and the third one is tertiary consumers. First one, primary consumers. Consumers, they are nothing but they are depending on the other organisms. Now, what are primary consumers? They are the herbivores. They feed on producers. They are also called as key industry animals. When we see the example, we will get a very clear picture about the primary consumers. Example, deer, rabbit, cattle, goat, sheep, grasshopper, molluscans, and many of the protozoans, etc. These are all depending on the producers. The second type of consumer is secondary consumers. The organisms which feed on herbivores. For example, frog, wildcat, fox, snake, etc. Here primary consumers means they are completely depending on the producers. Means they are depending on other organisms somehow. Likewise, here secondary consumers means these are the organisms which feed on herbivores, and such type of consumers are called as the secondary consumers. Frog, wildcat, fox, snake, etc. Next comes the third type of consumer, that is nothing but tertiary consumer. Here tertiary consumers are the organisms which feeds on secondary consumers and primary consumers. First what we studied is primary consumer. They were depending on the producers. Secondary consumers were depending on the primary consumers. Now the tertiary consumers are depending or which feeds on the secondary consumers, and both the primary and the secondary consumers. Example, wolf, hawk, tiger, lion, etc. Like this, many of the carnivores can be taken as example for tertiary consumers. Next comes the decomposers. What are decomposers? They are the bacteria and fungi. They breaks down the complex organic matter into simple inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, nitrogen, phosphorus, and they also helps in recycling of the materials. Decomposers are nothing but these are the microbes which are meant for decaying the substances, that is decaying the organic substances or the organic materials, and these decomposers are capable of converting or breaking down the complex organic substances into simple inorganic substances, and also they releases the substances or gases like carbon dioxide, nitrogen and phosphorus, and helps in recycling the material. And these are the organisms, that is decomposers, which keep our environment clean, hygiene, and they completely recycle all the organic materials. This is we complete about the decomposers, consumers as well as the producers.